Hello and welcome to another episode of Steelfur Speaks. The World Championships in Barcelona has just concluded. As followers of this channel will know, after all of these major events that I attend, we like to do a little review of the event. How did it go? How did it not go? Not talking about it from my perspective as a personal individual and how I experienced it, but rather looking at the things that happened at the event and talking about whether we feel they were run well, did we feel like the team did a good job, do we feel like the structure of the event and all those kind of things was good. So, World Championships in Barcelona, let's give a bit of an overview. This was a 4-day event. The first day just featured the player dinner in the evening. Then we moved on to day 1 of the World Championships on Friday. It ran then on Saturday and Sunday with the top 8 on Sunday. Simultaneously, there were lots of side events happening on Friday, including various tournaments for the Sagrada Familia promo card, which was released specially for this event. It's a gorgeous card. You can see it right here with the Sagrada in the background, probably what looks like Solana. This was available at multiple times over the weekend in side events. The calling then itself started on Saturday. It was a sealed bright lights tournament, and it finished on Sunday with a top 8. There was also a Living Legend Battle Hardened happening on Sunday, which obviously was for a gold foil Crown of Providence and various other things. So, with the event being what it is, let's review those individual parts of it. So, the player dinner was an invite-only event for everyone who qualified for the World Championship dinner. If you did not qualify for the World Championship dinner, you could pay €95 for a ticket to go to the evening, right? Or if you bought the Fabled package for the side events or the main events on the weekend, you could pay €60 to go to the dinner. That dinner is where every year there is a chance to get into artists earlier. There's a chance to meet attendees and celebrities earlier. There's a chance to talk to James White, potentially, and other people who work at Legend Story Studios. And there's also often a talk which you can usually watch live broadcasted by a content creator or just get the highlights from people who are there. So that's the reason you go. There's food, there's drinks, and there are, there's announcements and stuff, and you could be part of that hype. What do we think about that? I have heard from various people who attended. There was not an open bar. There were not really a lot of free drinks given out at all. There was a paid bar. It's still Spain, so beer is only €3 per drink. But the fact is you've paid €60 for a ticket entry, and you have to pay extra for drinks. That stung a little for some people. The food was good, but not fantastic. So really, you're getting fed a little bit. You're paying for your drinks. Actually, what's going on is you're paying for early access to the venue, and you're paying for early access to artists. You're paying for privileged access to James White and the NSS team. Kind of really up to you to decide if that's worth €60, €95. Personally, and I said this before the event, I feel like that is something that if you haven't really qualified, if you're not getting it for free, it's not really worth the money. You can get all of the news from the dinner without paying that money, just through Discord and through the live stream of the talk and things like that. You're not going to miss out on anything except the hype of being in the room. To some people, that's worth the money. To other people, it isn't. Especially in Spain, where you can eat in very good restaurants for very cheaply. I thought that my €60 was much better spent on kind of 5 rounds of beer and a load of food at a nearby venue, a nearby tapas place, rather than being inside the venue, and I saw all the news about the venue. So that's just, objectively, I don't necessarily know that if you're going to charge that much for entry, pre-early entry, I think you need to step up the food game, whether that's having a sit-down dinner or some sort of more catered affair that actually gives people good quality of food, or whether that involves a bar with a limited cap or a number of drinks vouchers per person has been done at other events. I feel like that's kind of where we should get to a higher standard on that, if that's not unreasonable. These things are not cheap. It's worth noting. I have worked at events. I know how much it costs to feed people. I know how much it costs to have a dinner. I know how much it costs to do a buffet. It's not cheap. So, and most of the people in the room aren't paying for it. So if you're going to do it, it's kind of tricky. It's kind of tricky to give people the quality they expect for the price, but also the cost that you have to pay when you're already paying for a lot of people to be there for free is quite high. So it's kind of a bit of a tricky one. It's hard to imagine they make it better while keeping the cost the same, but it's also hard to imagine that it's worth it for the money that people are paying unless you get a free invitation. So it's a bit of a tricky one. On to Friday, there were... Obviously, the World Championships ran really smoothly. They had their best team on Worlds, making sure that it ran on time. They had lots of judges. I think I heard that they had one judge per 14 people, which obviously is a lot of judges for that event. So Worlds was run really smoothly. The side events on Friday were not, right? I was participating in one, but just putting that aside, objectively, there were still people queuing up for the Classic Constructed side event as it was supposed to start, with a queue that would potentially take an hour to fill. There were not enough desks registering people, meaning that it was taking way too long to sign up for those events and get them started. I don't think any side event on Friday started on time, and one of them, in fact, this Team Sealed event, which I was in, started drastically late. I spoke to a few people, not obviously giving their names. One was a judge and the other worked for Tournament Center, and the implication was that they were quite understaffed on the day. Quite a lot of judges were getting very frustrated because they were being asked things that they didn't have time to learn about because they were busy firefighting in other areas. And generally, the staff that were put on to managing the side events made a lot of mistakes, which led to tournaments being quite delayed. I heard the reason the Team Sealed was delayed was that rather than registering just the captains, which you are supposed to do to run this event, instead, the person organising the event actually registered every single person who bought a ticket, which meant that there were players who were on teams who were registered as captains or as if they were captains on the GEM software. I know for a fact because my opponent in round 3 of that tournament was called out by a judge who said, "Hey, you're actually playing at this other table, you're a captain," and he said, "I'm not, I'm the C player on another team." And that hadn't been caught in 3 rounds, and he hadn't been dropped. He had just given out 3 free buys to his opponents as a no-show without being dropped from the tournament, which is kind of inexcusable. If someone doesn't show up for a round, they should get reported and dropped. They shouldn't be allowed to stay in the system. So, for reasons, whatever, I was, told, I don't know if it's true, it could just be hearsay, that the person who was organising the side event tournaments had never actually used the software that they used for the tournaments before, and that was why he made mistakes. Whether that's true, I couldn't validate that, but I did want to say it because it did come from an interesting source. But regardless of the reason, running, the Team Sealed started, I think, 2 to 3 hours late. And that's just inexcusable. A tournament starts at 11, especially a sealed tournament. The players should not be receiving their packs at 1:30. That's not really acceptable in any realms of imagination. And every tournament that started, most of the tournaments that day had their last round cancelled because they ran out of time. And okay, it's an all-right remedy to give everyone a load of free ticks instead of running the last round because you run out of time. I appreciate that. That was a good gesture. But obviously people came to play Flesh and Blood, and the fact that you're cancelling rounds of your side event tournaments because, because you've run out of time is a problem. So Friday, definitely a mess. And I think that the solution and the resolution to all of this was that basically judges were asked to work for longer on the rest of the weekend. I know I heard some judges telling me their shifts started an hour earlier. They were asked to come in earlier. I know that some other people said that Tournament Center, the judge teams were asking if there were judges who were available at the event but not already playing in an event who might mind coming onto the team and working. So efforts were made to recruit more judges for the rest of the weekend, but the fact still stands that the tournament was understaffed from the Friday. And also, just to put this in context, a lot of judges were rejected from the judging team. I think if you look at the breakdown of countries represented, there was one judge from the UK, for example, when I know about 7 or 8 applied. There were lots of judges from some other countries that were sort of more represented, but the judge team potentially should have had an extra 4 or 5 people from the beginning. And one of the things I personally found frustrating is that if you look at a tournament like Birmingham, where we had a team sealed that ran very, very smoothly, and we had multiple sealed events that ran very smoothly, that judge who ran those events wasn't accepted to judge at Worlds and a different judge was put on the team sealed event, and then the team sealed event did not run smoothly. So it seems like we're not actually acknowledging the judges that have run events smoothly and letting them run the same events at larger tournaments or other tournaments. And we're losing that knowledge on how to run these events cleanly that we should be learning from our previous experiences. So that kind of raises a question as to why certain judges are getting approved over others, why. I've heard that a lot of judges from, say, a country like Belgium, for example, are being brought on board when other judges from other countries aren't being brought on board as often. Now, I'm not accusing anyone of bias. Obviously, there are lots of good judges competing for a very small number of positions, but it is just worth having a discussion when we're having judges who have a lot of experience running specific types of events not being brought on to run those events at the Worlds, and then the event doesn't run smoothly. That's obviously going to raise questions and have questions being asked. So I really would like to see more of sort of a broader spectrum of judges being brought in, and I would like to see more of an acknowledgement that if a judge runs an event well, they should be brought on to run that event again, especially when it's a much high stakes thing. Now, saying that the rest of the event after Friday ran much, much more smoothly. Obviously, someone had a conversation, more money was made available, more people were brought on, shifts were extended, and all these kind of things were brought into a situation. So, those conversations happened, and then the rest of the event ran smoothly. It did feel like there were a lot more judges, but we have to emphasize that Friday was a big problem. And I think what sums up my feelings about Friday more than anything, which actually really upset me when I heard it, was I was talking to a new player who told me that their opponent in the previous round had kind of sharked them a bit. I think there was a situation where they were trying to use Teklo and to block with the equipment and then to save the equipment from the combat chain. And their opponent was like, no, I've already moved on, and didn't let them do it. And I was like, well, why don't you just call a judge? That seems like the perfect situation to call a judge. And he was like, well, I did think I was right, and my opponent was rushing things, but I looked around and I couldn't see a judge, and because I couldn't see one, I didn't think there was one to call, so I didn't call a judge. And to me, that's abject failure. I'll go as far as to use that language. That's beyond acceptable. The whole point of even the judges' clothing, the yellow shirts, is to be visible, is so that players know that there is a judge nearby that they can call when they need to, and that judge will help them through their situation. So the fact that a new player gets sharked, doesn't call a judge to second guess something because they can't see one, that's just not acceptable. And clearly, LSS and Tournament Center both agreed, because for the rest of the weekend there were a lot more judges present. But the fact that Friday was allowed to happen really just doesn't sit so well with me. This is not Tournament Center's first event. This is not the judge team's first event. They should have a better understanding of how many people are going to show up. Maybe it's the case that Worlds was just much, much larger than they thought it would be. It is worth noting that Worlds was larger than any other European event so far, as well as potentially being one of the largest events in the world in terms of how many people were there. We had a 907-person side event, which was happening at the same time as the main events were also happening. So you can imagine how many players were in the room, right? So that is worth considering. It was huge, so maybe it was just more people than they anticipated, but there was definitely frustration, and that one incident where a new player said, hey, I couldn't see a judge, so I didn't call one, that just struck me, right? Because that's just not how TCGs are supposed to be, and that's just not how you create a welcoming environment for new players, right? So, moving on, things got a lot better, and I think it's important to note, when I hear that things have gone wrong, because judges will tell me, hey, this went wrong, that went wrong, it's not necessarily down to individual judges that cause these problems, right? All the judges are fantastic, and that's one of the reasons why they come to me and they tell me, hey, this wasn't great, that wasn't great, we think this was going on behind the scenes. It's because they want me to know what was happening. They don't want judges to get blamed for what was going on. And that's one of the reasons why I step in to defend judges, because the judges are fantastic. The majority of the judges are great. And we've talked in the past that some of the judges don't know the rules as well and they're looking things up on their phones. But, that's not a consistent. The majority of the judges are brilliant. The majority of the judges know the rules. They're helpful. If they don't know, they're asking questions. But there definitely was some problems with the judging at the tournament. Moving beyond, the organization and those problems, there were still problems with some judges at the tournament. One specific incident that I witnessed springs to mind. We were playing in the Team Sealed, and the judges didn't know the rules for Team Sealed, the very event they were running, right? We said to them, can we play one of each hero? Do we have to play one of each hero? Can we play whatever? And they were like, yeah, you can play whatever. And then we thought this was wrong because we'd looked it up beforehand, and we said, actually, no, the rules say you have to play one of each hero. And the judge was like, okay, then do that. And I was like, well, I just put my hat on for a second. I said, well, what have you been telling people? And he said, I haven't really been saying anything. And I said, what are you going to do if people don't know the rules and one person sits down across from me and their whole team has the same deck? And he's like, oh, well, I'll probably just say it's my bad and we'll move on. And I'm like, but if they present the wrong deck, that's a game loss. And he's like, okay, so, thing. At which point we kind of say, you need to do an announcement. And one of my friends goes over to the judge for the tournament and says, hey, I don't think people know the rules on this because there seems to be a lot of confusion. Can you do an announcement that people have to use different heroes? And they did, and things got cleaned up. But it does still highlight the fact that there were judges working on events who either didn't know the rules for the tournaments they were running, or what I suspect is more likely, had been put on those tournaments at short notice because of a massive shortage of people, and just didn't have the time to figure out what was going on. Like, I'm not going to assume any of these judges are, incapable of learning the rules for the tournaments they're running. I'm going to assume that these people weren't given the time due to the shortage of people to learn the tournaments of the rules they were running. I'm assuming this person was, given a task, go and give out packs for this tournament, and not given time to think, well, what are the rules? What questions are people going to ask me, and to prepare, right? That's what I'm going to assume. So we're kind of seeing the cascade effect of poor organization on that Friday, leading to judge frustration, where we're asking questions of the judge and we're not getting answers, or they're not giving consistent answers to the entire tournament. And that's kind of a big problem. So if we're rating the organization, right, we can't be entirely unfair to Tournament Center. Friday was, I'll just be blunt, a bit of a shit show, right? Saturday and Sunday ran fine. Worlds ran fine. I can't in good conscience give the organization of this tournament higher than a 3, but I don't really want to give it a 2 either, because if one day goes bad and you fix it, that is redeeming. If 2 days go bad and you don't fix it, then you get 1, right? Or you get 2. So I think we can give, organization for this event a reasonably decent 3 out of 5. Friday was rough. There were probably more people than they expected, but they fixed it. And on Sunday, we had a 910-person event, right? It was actually 950 and 40 people didn't show up. But we still had a 910-person event that ran pretty smoothly. And, people were a bit confused at the start because their gems weren't updating, but the judges were there in force just saying, look, gem is updating slowly, you'll get your things. And all these sorts of things were smoothed out. So I think organization thoroughly deserves a 3 out of 5. Everything was run smoothly except Friday. More judges should have been hired. Some of the judges I saw on Sunday and I talked to were really tired because they'd had to work longer shifts than they expected to make up for the lack. More judges should have been hired in advance. So 3 out of 5 is what you deserve. The judging gets a 3 out of 5 as well. And I'll explain this in a bit more detail, right? There were more moments of friction with judges than I think there needs to be. There are reported moments of confusion where one judge said one thing and another judge said another thing. There's a big sort of area of confusion around disqualifications that happened at the event, which, we're not going to get qualification for yet. So I think there's still a bit of sort of friction in terms of judges not all agreeing on the same rules, and still a bit of friction in terms of judges being trained to say to all think the same thing and give out the appropriate rulings. Maybe I'm being unfair. I think actually maybe judging could get a 4 out of 5. we're going here with the objective that 95% of things seem to have gone smoothly. The tournaments were run really strictly. Most questions seems like they were answered really well. I didn't really hear a lot of complaints from, people about the judges, except that big sort of Friday thing where the judges, were doing all this kind of stuff. So, they're somewhere between a 3 and a 4 out of 5. I feel like they did an adequate job. I feel like if you were in Worlds, you'd probably give them a 5 out of 5. And if you're on the side events, you might give them a 3 out of 5. So I think we're maybe happy just giving them a 4 out of 5. In terms of, overall fun, I would say that the event was fantastic. The amount of artists they had, the amount of stalls they had, the professor's experience, the stage, the cosplay competition this year was amazing with so many entrants, which is a direct result of the fact that LSS committed to upping the participation prizes massively. And that has had the knock-on effect of loads more people putting in the effort to sign up and bring their cosplays. So all of these things, 100% add to the fun. Even the range of formats available now with the UPF and the Commoner and the Team Sealed and on-demand drafts and the calling and having the Living Legend format, I feel like there was so much fun to be had for everyone in the Fab community, from the more casual people who want to cosplay and do a treasure hunt and take photos with each other, and even the fact that the venue was located so centrally and so easy to get food and things with people afterwards. It feels like everything about this tournament was geared up for fun, and bar the organization problems, it seems like everyone had a fantastic time. People were signing up in droves for the side events and playing just tons of Fab all weekend. So actually, I think I'd give it a 5 out of 5 for fun, maybe a 4 out of 5 because some people had a rough day on Friday, and that is a whole day out of a 3-day event. But I think the fun was right up there. I think in terms of guests, in terms of artists, in terms of breadth of events and things available, I think LSS knocked it out of the park. I think it was fantastic. I think I haven't really heard, aside from specific complaints about specific things, everyone I've spoken to has come out saying that was a fantastic weekend. I had a great time playing Fab. I would 100% do it again. I would 100% go to Barcelona again to play Fab. I could easily see the World Championship being there again. I think it's a great city which is cheap, easily accessible, good hotels, good accommodation, good event spaces. If Barcelona became Europe's event for home for Worlds every second year, I think people would 100% be on board with that. Maybe it should move around, but equally, if you found a good venue, a good price, and something you're happy with, I think everyone would agree it's fine to go back there again. It doesn't have to be in a different country every time. If it works, rather than going to an untested location for such a big event. So if in 2 years' time Worlds were back in Barcelona, I don't think you'd have a lot of people complaining. I think it was very, very fun. On the formats, how do we feel about Sealed as a calling format? I don't even want to get too much into Bright Lights because I don't think Bright Lights Sealed is particularly good. I do think it's Sealed better than Draft. I think there were some good games, but there was a lot of Teklavos and there was a lot of fatigue. There was a lot of games that just came down to shoot gun. I got my Evos before you. Shoot my gun. Attack once. Okay, cool. Yeah. You got your Evos before me, so I deck out first, so you fatigue me. That wasn't great. I really don't think I rate Sealed as a calling format. It felt like, even going 6-2, it felt like there were a lot of games in that Sealed tournament where I did not have agency, where it was really just up to sort of luck of my packs, even as to whether I won or lost. And lots of people who dropped because they opened packs. This is after paying €90 or 75, or I can't even remember how much it was, to play in the event. There were lots of people who dropped because the quality of their packs weren't great, which doesn't feel like what a calling should be. If I'm being honest, I think a calling should be a constructed format, tournament, or drafts. You have a lot of agency, there's a lot of skill involved in drafts. I don't think Sealed is the format for a calling. Everything else was fine. Side events had a bit of everything for everyone. Scheduling was fine. You could do tons of side events and tons of different formats. Living Legend was Stavro dominated, which is fine. I don't really have a problem with Living Legend. There is a bit of a debate as to whether you ban it or you just leave it how it is and you run one Living Legend tournament a year, and the second something beats Stavro, then that's kind of fun, but there's not really much else to say about it. Everything else was kind of fine. The Worlds format was as it should be. Classic, Constructed, and Draft. An opportunity to show your skills in the two main formats of the game. And the winner is someone who managed to go very well in Draft, very well in Classic Constructed, and of course won the Classic Constructed top 8. It should always be Classic Constructed. So yeah, that's the final takeaway. I think the feedback I heard from a lot of people was that Sealed wasn't really a calling format, and I think that's worth taking on board. Why it was calling, why it was Sealed, I don't know. I've heard conspiracy theorists saying that it was a sealed format just to sell booster boxes. It's worth noting that amongst all the sealed events this weekend, we probably sold about 410 cases worth of Fab, probably a bit more, which amounts to maybe like 1% potentially of the print run, maybe like 3 or 4% of the print run of the set. So it did make a dent, but it wasn't gonna, make or break the set's value or validity to run the sealed. So all those people who are saying, oh, they only did it because they needed to sell bright lights, obviously it contributes with the number of packs that were sold over the various sealed events this weekend, but it's not going to make or break the set, I don't think. So the format, yeah, not sure about the format. Everything else, I would say, is fine. I think the format of the main event, the format of Worlds, was 5 out of 5. That is just what it should be. It shouldn't include Blitz. You shouldn't have to prepare 3 different formats to win the World Championships. Blitz is more high variance by its nature. It gets more interesting heroes by its nature, but it's much easier for a hero to dominate in. It should just be CC and Draft. I don't think calling should be sealed format. I went in with the optimism. I went in with an open mind. I even made day 2, so I played it well, but it just doesn't feel like the sealed is what a calling really should be. I feel like if you want to test out sealed in a professional tournament setting, do a PTI or do a battle hardened, but I don't feel like calling should be sealed. Maybe there'll be a set that proves me wrong, but I feel that's where I landed on that. I had fun. It was for some fun games, but I did feel like I didn't have agency in a lot of the other games. Even some of the games I won, I felt like there was only one correct play, and that play was entirely dictated by the packs that I opened at the start of the tournament rather than my skill as a deck builder or as a player. So format, 5 out of 5 if you're in Worlds, 3 out of 5 if you're in the calling, maybe even 2, would not repeat. Side events, fantastic. The breadth of the side events was amazing. And that's my review. Organisation, if we don't count Friday, maybe 4 out of 5. If we do count Friday, maybe a low 3. Judging, 5 out of 5 for the main event. Again, Friday was an abnormality. They worked to fix it. You can't really punish them too hard for it. But there were definite problems, including that one incident I talked about with the new player that made me quite upset. So, that's where we are. World Championship Barcelona. Do you agree with these thoughts? Do you not agree with these thoughts? I would love to hear your comments on the event. Most of you, I'm sure, had a fantastic time and have nothing but positive things to say. And I don't want, people who judge to think I'm bashing them or people who ran it to think I'm bashing them. It's worth being honest about the things that went well and didn't go well so that we can move forward together to have better games of Flesh and Blood in person. As always, I've been Steelfur Speaks. If you liked this episode, do like and subscribe or give me a comment about what you liked about this episode. That lets me know that I've done a good job, and that is how I fuel my content creator brain. If you really liked what I'm saying and you enjoy this sort of content, I do have a Patreon. It's not very complicated. You just get to interact with me a bit more if you're in it. And you can give me ideas for episodes and tell me how much you enjoyed it. Other things going on, Chapter 8 of the Flo's Choice is being written, will be out soon, so you can look for that, but otherwise I'll talk to you soon and have a good one.